Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. We are joined today by our guest, Dennis Gorman. We'll be talking a lot about the Metro Division and some of the races in the playoffs that were, some of them were, I think, simplified last night with some of the outcomes of the games. But we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so let's talk a minute about we're going to mention the New York Mets, but we're going to talk about GMs in general this time of year. So a couple things with the New York Mets. If there was one player that all the fans agreed should make the team, it's Darren Ruff. But the only problem is the Mets traded 3 players for him, and Billy Epler's tied to him because he made it seem like it was the trade of the century a year ago. So if he's healthy, he probably makes the team. So now we're looking at which young guy makes the team. And, so I turned to Brett Beatty, and he's playing third base, and he's doing great. And Eduardo Escobar not doing so great, hitting like 130, got 3 hits all spring. Now, I understand that, they still have to pay Escobar, and they could throw him in that right-handed DH thing, but then that's kind of screws up Billy Epler's plans of Daniel Vogelbach, who, in his words, can't buy an effing hit, said that about 2 days ago in a spring training game running to first base. So, Dennis, it's a complicated thing because the talent should win out here, but I do feel like the Mets GM is going to look at his favorites first and give them a month before he gives the kids a chance, and I'm not sure it's the right thing to do.
No, I think that's exactly. I think you're exactly right. The GM has, he has a bet placed in some guys that he would like to see be successful, because if they're successful, he's successful, and theoretically, the organization is successful. I think you mentioned Brett Beatty probably deserves a job coming out of spring training, but I can see an argument being made, especially by from Buck Showalter. Eduardo Escobar was great last year defensively.
For a month. He was great for a month.
Well, the manager was very high on him all year long, especially defensively, and so I think he would push for that. But you can make the argument you could use a guy like Escobar in a role, in a utility kind of role. He can play a few different positions. A guy like Darren Ruff probably is a guy who's a defensive replacement / pinch runner at best. I mean, he proved when he came over here at the end of at the trade deadline and through the playoffs, as short of a run as it was, that he can't be a guy that gets regular at bats. He was active. His bat was actively hurting the lineup.
Well, I mean, it's funny because, and a lot of major league managers operate this way, and the 2 New York teams have some similarities here, where if Beatty is not the everyday third baseman, it makes more sense to send him to AAA to get him consistent at bats. The Yankees right now with their middle infield situation, Anthony Volpe and Oswald Peraza are 2 top prospects. One of them is going to win the shortstop job. And since it doesn't seem like they're going to trade Gleyber Torres, at least not right now, the loser of that competition probably ends up the shortstop in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. So, and right now it seems like Volpe is going to win the job. He's having the better spring training, but they're both really good prospects. But you can't let young guys, even though they deserve to make the major league roster, sit on the bench because they still need that experience of being an everyday player. So
sure. I mean, I'm not even suggesting Beatty should sit the bench. He's a better fielder. He has a better arm than Escobar. Like Escobar had trouble reaching first base towards the end of last year for the last month. So I'm not suggesting that at all, but I just, you illustrating what you think Buck Showalter will do is exactly why I didn't want Buck Showalter as a manager, because he will always default to the veterans, especially ones that he's had on his team, like in Baltimore, like 6 years ago, like Jolie Rodriguez and other players that he's brought in that haven't done well.
So when is he signing Zach Britton?
I thought it would be already. I'm shocked.
We still there's still time before opening day.
All right, let's get started. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, March 24th, 2023.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, since we have two people who focus on the Metro Division, we'll start there, and we'll start with the game that I checked in on a little bit last night. When that was the Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes. Rangers win the game 2-1 on a goal, an Adam Fox goal, being the difference in the game in the third period. Dennis, I saw the Shesterkin save. What I call a Gumby save, because I don't know how the hell he stretched out like that to make that save. And this is the reason why. And I know Russ doesn't want to curse the Rangers in terms of putting expectations on them, but I look at the Metro and I look at Carolina knocked down a peg with Svechnikov and Pacioretty not being able to score for them, and their offense being challenged and their goaltending having question marks. And New Jersey, who does not have a ton of experience. They're a very talented team, but I have questions about them in goal too. And I look at the Rangers, and they load it up, and they have arguably the best or second best goaltender in the NHL. And that's why I think the Rangers are coming out of the Metro.
I think that's exactly right. I was really disappointed with what Carolina didn't do at the deadline. Freddie Anderson, when he's healthy, he's pretty solid, but he's had issues over the course of his career staying healthy. That's not breaking news to anyone. I thought maybe they try to go out and get someone at the deadline just as an insurance policy. Once Pacioretty went down, I thought, you need another scoring winger. You can't have enough scoring. I heard they had kicked the tires on Kevin Hayes, but that really didn't go anywhere. And the fact that Svechnikov tore his ACL, that's just bad luck. But it falls back to the point: if you had gotten someone at the deadline, whether it's a Kevin Hayes, a JVR. I mean, what Philly was asking for JVR is what, a third or fourth? They were literally just asking for a draft pick. And
Come on, Dennis. They got Jesse Puljujarvi. That's the savior of all.
I mean, that was a depth thing.
That
really was going to help them.
Yeah, a third line checking wing is going to put them right over the top. And so if you look at the first round, if it's theoretically, if it's Islanders, Carolina in the first round, I know the Islanders haven't had a terrific year, but if it comes down to a goaltending matchup, I'm going to put my money on Ilya Sorokin. If it's Rangers versus Hurricanes, I'm going to put money on the Rangers because they have a better goaltender and they have more offensive firepower.
I mean, Russ, you couldn't foresee, if you were Don Waddell, you couldn't foresee the Svechnikov injury. It happened after the deadline. That's, like Dennis said, that's bad luck. But supposedly they kicked tires on Timo Meier. Supposedly they kicked tires on Patrick Kane, but Kane didn't want to go to Carolina. There were forwards out there. They could have, they could have had Philadelphia retain 50% on JVR, and he would have helped on the power play. There were forwards out there that didn't end up getting moved or got moved someplace else that the Hurricanes didn't jump at. And that, I think, remember, there was talk about them going after Nick Schmaltz with Arizona. Why? Because the contract was locked in and it was at a certain amount, and they always have to think about the financial ramifications. That's why Dundon is, his organization has never won crap, because at a certain point you have to take a chance, and they didn't take a chance.
Yeah, it's like, basically Dundon and Don Waddell went shopping for a Jaguar and I ended up with a Hugo. I mean, that's really what happened. And I liked Carolina preseason to come out of the East and thought they should still do something more at the deadline. They haven't. The weird thing is Anderson's so weird because he's better on the road than he is at home. Mm-hmm. He's just a weird goalie anyhow. But if the Rangers were to match up against Carolina again, it still would go 7. There's no doubt in my mind. I would give the Rangers the edge now where, earlier in the year I wouldn't have. And that's because, Carolina hasn't done enough to replace Svechnikov or even show that, they're going to be able to score enough. But what Carolina can do is still check and keep the game score down. And they definitely would do that, just like in the game last night. There's a lot of Ranger fans that have been killing Shesterkin. not the same guy, not blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. He's pretty damn close right now. And that's really, I think, what matters.
And if you look at the year he had last year, a .935 save percentage, I think that was the third best single season save percentage any goalie has ever had.
Right.
So, I mean, how much better could he possibly have gotten? Are we talking a .950 save percentage, .975 save percentage? I mean, look, there's always going to be a little bit of a come down.
Right. And, I mean, it may be an example of Shesterkin pacing himself. It's like, I mean, not to say you're purposely going to have a 905 or 910 save percentage instead of 935, but you're not going to sort of go balls out in the regular season when the aim of this team is to win a Stanley Cup. And I think realistically, with them adding, Tarasenko and Mikkola in the deal with St. Louis, and then adding Kane in the deal. And I know Russ is not the biggest fan of the Kane deal, but it does give them 3 lines of really good offensive depth. Their defense is really good, and like I said,
the defense is good. It's not really good.
It's not at the level. It's not at the level of Carolina, but it's pretty good.
Their forward defense is weak, especially on the Kane line. That's right. Where they are susceptible.
Right. And if they come up against the wrong team, like if they come up against a team that can counterattack.
Yeah, if they go against Boston, they're going to have a problem.
Right.
I will say this, though, as far as the goalie situation. So, in 02-03, Marty Turco had a .932. I covered that year, and he was just tremendous. The year after, he had a .913, but he won 6 more games. So it's like it's normal. You can't keep up a save percentage like that. Nobody can. So I just think that was unrealistic for fans to say as far as Shesterkin goes. That's all. But yeah, they're doing fine. The Devils are going to be a tough matchup though, because even though I know Ranger fans will be there in force in New Jersey, and that will probably help the Rangers a little bit on the road, the Devils are really fast, and they are faster than the Rangers. And the Kane line has slowed the Rangers down a little bit. And if they match the Hughes line against that, Dennis, that could be a problem.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that people have talked about is Jersey speed. And that for sure is going to be an issue. And these are not the Tortorella, Elaine Vigneault Rangers that could defend a little bit.
Right.
This is not a group that's looking to do a whole lot of defending. I mean, arguably their 3 best defensive forwards are Tyler Mott, Barclay Goodrow, and if you want to talk about the job, because Trocheck, that's a fair point. But because Zibanejad has done a pretty good job this year in terms of lifting the stick and breaking up plays, but they're not a team that's looking to win too many games 2-1, 3-2. They're looking to score 4 or 5 goals a game. The
interesting thing here, and then we'll get off the Rangers page. The interesting thing here is Gallant. His reputation is not as a wide open Peter Laviolette style coach. He's always been more of a defensive minded guy, and he's been handed this team that plays more of a that has.
I'm not even sure what his reputation is anymore, Mike. That's the funny thing.
It was. Let's just say it was.
It was. I think now Gerard Gallant is kind of like a go with the flow. Like whatever my team is, I'm going to just keep throwing those guys out there. Like I don't see a whole lot of X's and O's, Dennis. I don't know if you do, but he just throws his guys out there in repetition, just hoping for the best a lot of times.
Well, it's interesting. Before their last game against Boston, I guess that was back in January, he had talked about the Bruins essentially having 3 scoring lines. And the day of the Kane trade, I had mentioned that to him. I said, when you look at your group now, you essentially have 3 scoring lines. You have the Zibanejad line, the Trocheck line, and the Kidd line. And this was a few minutes before the trade was officially announced. I said, do you think this is the trend in the game today, that instead of having the traditional 2 scoring lines, checking line, heavy line, that you're going to have teams go 3 scoring lines and kind of a hybrid energy checking line? And he said, well, no, in this case, it was just the way things worked out for us. But, but he felt pretty good about what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think he has the luxury. I think it's both a luxury and a curse of who he can throw out over the boards in any given situation. I mean, I was at practice Wednesday for Newsday, and he was tinkering with his power play units. His first unit now is Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, blah, 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 Patrick Kane on the right goal line, Panarin on the right half wall, and Adam Fox. And
yes, I hate that. Zibanejad has the best shot of all of them. Kane and Panarin are distributors, and you're now taking Zibanejad away from his best shot, one of the best in the league.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, but Zibanejad's still going to be on the left side.
No, all right, but he's not in his normal spot though.
No, because his normal spot is the left circle.
Right.
Kane and Panarin are both on the right side.
Yeah.
Kane is on the right goal line. Panarin's on the right half wall.
Better than what they had, I will say that.
Yeah.
But I do like him from a little further away because when he shoots it like the way he could shoot it,
yes,
it causes big problems for goalie.
And early on, Dennis, I noticed because I watched the couple games after the trade. Whenever they had a power play, Panarin was constantly feeding it to Kane. It was like cross ice pass, pass. Okay, let's get off of this. And I know you want him to be successful, but the most important thing here is to score a goal.
Right.
Well,
so.
Yeah, and that had been both a problem on the power play and on 5-on-5 because early on they had Kane. It was Panarin, Trocheck, Kane. They were both looking cross ice, looking for each other. Neither one was looking to score, so the coach, kind of broke that up pretty quickly. Yeah. My theory had been, at least my thinking had been going in, if you're going to have Panarin and Kane, I think that they are better suited on separate lines. So. Yeah. Theoretically, your first line could be Kreider, Zibanejad, Kane. Second line, Panarin, Trocheck, Tarasenko, and you have distributors and shooters on each line.
I think that's better, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
One last thing, Mike.
Yeah.
Just because I think Dennis might agree with this, and it's good talk. Right now, in the Metro, the two most not talked about defensemen are Adam Fox and Dougie Hamilton, and I don't know why. Everybody used to talk about Fox. Now it's kind of like, we're kind of over Fox, even though he's almost a point a game as a defenseman. I know what Erik Karlsson's doing, and Dougie Hamilton's doing the same thing, and neither of these guys get talked about a lot, especially even in Norris talk anymore.
Yeah, I think with Fox, it's a case of there's Kel McCarr, there's, like you said, Erik Karlsson, there's a few other guys. Yeah, right. So he kind of gets overlooked a little bit. Plus, I think the team that he's on kind of hurts him because people are going to say, well, he should put up numbers because he has all these guys with him. Hamilton, I think he gets overlooked because, however, the narrative around his defensive play. He's never going to be a guy that's a shutdown guy.
No.
But the guy is a point-a-game player.
It's an accurate narrative, Dennis. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's an excellent defenseman. He's a good offensive contributor. He's great on the power play, but he's a poor man's Erik Karlsson. He's not. Karlsson's going to score 100 points, and
Karlsson's on like his own island.
Right.
Hamilton's going to be in the top 5 scorers for defensemen in the league.
He sort of suffers from the same thing that John Carlson has suffered over the last few years. It's like he's not particularly great defensively. He's very good offensively. But we know that there's a balance that has to be struck for guys who win the Norris. And I think Fox, when he has that offensive defensive balance. I think McCarr does the same thing.
Yeah,
Karlsson, this is the stages.
I hate to say it because he's an annoyance at times, Tony Soprano, but he's right. Miro Heiskanen gets overlooked too, no question.
I love Heiskanen. I think he's fantastic.
But anyhow, Mike, it's all right.
Heiskanen. Let's
times.
call the whole thing off. Okay. Look at the wild card race here, and it was an eventful night last night because the two teams chasing both were playing, chasing the Islanders, who had 82 points. Pittsburgh loses a game in Dallas 3-2 in regulation. The big story coming out of that game was actually before the game was the news about Tristan Jarry and his lower body injury. And it's starting to sound like this is the same thing, Dennis, that happened last year where they lose Jarry late in the season. You've got Casey DeSmith and they call up Dustin Tokarski. So, does he like the, what was it? The beef and broccoli or whatever the hell that Louis Domingue. Yeah. I mean, this is the same story playing out again.
Yeah, for sure. And, you kind of go back to the Winter Classic. Right after the Winter Classic, that's when we kind of first heard that Jarry was hurt, and they had to ride Casey DeSmith a little bit. And Casey DeSmith has been pretty good for them. And, and obviously, people talk about their Pittsburgh's top guys, Sidney, Malkin, Letang. I think you could throw Raquel in there, and Gunsel. Their top guys are good, and they've carried that team. But you look at their bottom six forwards have actively hurt them this year. The defense has not been great. Brian Dumoulin has been pretty much a punching bag for Penguins fans and Pittsburgh media, and
Petrie's been hurt, and Patterson's been hurt. Yeah.
But I did watch that game, and the one thing, Dennis, and I do think DeSmith is pretty good and may still be able to get him in. But the problem is he let up 2 goals in succession that just took the air out, and that was the problem. They were hanging with Dallas for that game. They were.
Right, and that's the thing. I think he's good enough maybe to get them in. Is he good enough to win them around? I don't think so.
I don't know.
And I think if the way the standings are right now, it looks like they might get Boston in the first round, and that's probably, if things go great for the Penguins, maybe a 5-game series.
Right. That's fair.
And the other team that's chasing the Islanders is Florida, and I watched that game intently against the Maple Leafs. And Russ, when the narrative that we set sort of plays out, it just makes me say, I guess what we were talking about, because as much I love Matthew Tkachuk. He's a pain in the ass to play against, but he's a great player, and Barkov, and they have a lot of talent, but they couldn't make any moves. Bill Zito couldn't make any moves at the deadline because they were just so up against the cap. And their defense, other than Aaron Ekblad, I mean, when you have Radko Gudas playing 20-plus minutes on your second pairing and Gustav Forsling is your number 2, sorry, your defense sucks.
Yeah, and I just watched it live a couple days ago and against the Flyers, and they had trouble with them. And it's bad. It's like they can outscore teams at times, but they really can't hold them back, and that's where Bob has to kind of be like superhuman for them to do it. The math's still good on them. The Islanders are definitely looking better now that Pittsburgh and Florida are sagging, no doubt. I still won't hand it to the Islanders and say they're going to be in, and definitely not saying they're going far, even though they have Sorokin. They have other problems. Again, I know Chris is saying in the chat room that Brock Nelson's back. He's back on the ice. It doesn't mean that he's even close to 100% or will contribute.
Yeah, he had his bell rung big time, and again by Noel Acciari. And Dennis, this is the thing about the Islanders. Okay, they have the advantage over the other 2 teams because they have Sorokin and the other teams don't. Bob is playing really well down the stretch for Florida, but I think Sorokin's up there with Vasilevsky and with Shesterkin. Defensively, they're pretty sound, but when they're playing Bolduc and Holmstrom and Hudson Fasching. I mean, and Zach Parise and Cal Clutterbuck, you're depending on them to score goals. This is not a very deep offensive team. I mean, I know they scored 6 or 7.
So I see the Islanders a lot, and you're right. And one of the things that I had been harping on this was going back to January, that I thought Lou Lamoriello needed to add a scoring winger with some speed, someone to play with Matt Barzal, because if you looked at the first few months of the season, Barzal would gain the offensive zone, and then he'd have to go left to right and hold up, waiting for a winger to gain the zone, and then he would try a diagonal cross ice pass to get broken up, and and then they have to go back and defend, and then rinse, wash, repeat. So Lou made the big move by going out and getting Horvat, and then Lane Lambert shifted Barzal from center to right wing, and with Horvat and Barzal together, especially in the first power play unit, the power play was clicking pretty well. Then Barzal gets hurt against Boston, and the power play is, I think, at 10%. But so that's an issue. As far as Brock Nelson, I was at practice yesterday for Newsday. He was a full participant in practice.
Mm-hmm.
After the game, we talked to him. He said he's perfectly fine. He got six stitches over his right eye. He went through the protocol, and then the decision was made after he went through the protocol, which I'm guessing was after everything went after going through the entire testing. It was probably midway through the second period when he was done, and the decision was made out of an abundance of caution, just to let him sit out the rest of the game.
They were leading it. So yeah,
they were leading, and then Lane Lambert confirmed that, and then they didn't do anything Wednesday. So everyone's first day back on the ice was yesterday. He was a full participant. So, I'm assuming he's going to be in the line. He traveled with the team to Columbus, so
he'll be in it. But nobody's going to say he's going to score right away after all this.
Sure, right. And that's a fair point.
And I still do want to talk about Horvat in the sense that, look, I look at all of his numbers, and yes, his faceoffs are really good. Actually, he's more giveaways than you would expect him to have. But he's going to be that same 55-point guy. He is. Right. He's good in the locker room. Everything else is good. There's nothing great about Bo Horvat, and you're now paying him a salary next year of a great player. Right? That's what you're paying him as. And if they don't go far this year, that's a bad move by Lou. I get it. He wanted to have some stability on the island to kind of keep people in it, ticket sales in it, hope to get in the playoffs. I get all that.
Right.
You gave him a ridiculous contract.
And Dennis, I think, because we looked at that roster before they made the Horvat deal and said, they have 6 players, 6 forwards, and now it's 7 that they're paying over $5 million. And okay, you're going to lose Mayfield in free agency more than likely, and your defense is not that good, and you're going to have to pay Sorokin after next year. So I think this was a bad move by Lou. And by the way, Anthony Beauvillier is scoring pretty well with Vancouver right now, folks.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, they just opened the UBS Arena a year ago. It's $1 billion arena, and last year, between COVID and the opening road trip and 100 other factors you want to throw in there, it didn't go great. And I don't think there is an appetite amongst ownership and amongst the front office to start a rebuild 2 years into a new building, and then when you're charging pretty significant ticket prices.
Although that shouldn't be what you determine whether your team needs to get retooled or not. It shouldn't be about that, but it clearly is.
I completely agree with you. Again, this is just kind of my reading of kind of the tea leaves, and having heard what John Ledecky has talked about and Lou Lamoriello has talked about, and Lane Lambert and the players. I mean, they've all talked about playoffs. They've all talked about wanting to win a cup. And do I think this is a cup team? No, I don't think there's nearly enough speed. I don't think there is nearly enough goal scoring on the wing. It's an older group, and you look at this summer, that more than likely they're going to lose Scott Mayfield, as Mike said. Then you start thinking about, okay, who could you trade to free up some money? Maybe it's a Josh Bailey, but if you're trading Josh Bailey, you're going to throw in a pretty significant sweetener, because Josh Bailey, I believe, is making between $5 and $6 million a year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Pagio, one of those guys. Okay, now at the other end of that game, the Leafs bounced back from one of their worst efforts of the season against the Islanders. Really good effort against the Panthers, who were, I think, they were a desperate team trying to, stay in that playoff race, and they're still in it 3 points back of the Islanders, 1 point back of Pittsburgh. Tampa Bay gets their ass handed to them by the Ottawa Senators, and Tampa right now is playing .500 hockey. They're not playing particularly well, and everybody's starting to doze off about the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I am not buying into this stuff. This team is a snake, Dennis. They are basically these games don't matter. The first game that's going to matter is April 17th, game 1, if it's in Toronto or if it's in Tampa, and that's when they'll turn it on. And I'm sorry. I don't. Every expert in the world can pick the Maple Leafs to beat the Lightning, but when I see it, that's when I'll believe it.
To me, the X factors in a Leafs Lightning series are Victor Hedman and Andrei Vasilevsky, and the Leafs don't have either one of those guys.
Yes.
So that's why, until further notice, I'm going to take the Lightning in that series. And again, going back to the game Tuesday night on Long Island, Leafs are up 1-0 after one period, and after 2 periods they're down 3-1, and at the end of the game, third
7.
period,
yeah.
Right, Marner scores to make it 3-2, and then 44 seconds later, Islanders score. It's 4-2, and then they just add on goals. And after the game, I asked Sheldon Keefe, and it was at the end of his availability, I said, is this a game that you flush, or is it too late in the season to flush games? And he disagreed with the premise of the question. He said, we did a lot of good things in the first 2 periods. We didn't like how we responded in the third period, but we've played a lot of good games and lately, and we've played a lot of good teams, so I think we're fine. I'm like, and I just kept thinking to myself, you lost 7-2 to an Islanders team that's not that's not particularly dynamic.
No, that's the one thing I don't like about Keefe. I know once in a while he'll get stern, but he's mostly patting these guys on the back, and he's locked in with this core, and he's going to go down with the ship with the rest of them if it doesn't work out. And it's just, that's why you can't ask him that question, because you're never going to get an honest answer.
Right. And Dennis, that's the thing. It's like, because, I cover the Leafs for Hockey Buzz, and in just the span of the last 10 days, they had a lead in the third period against Buffalo, blew it. They had a 4-2 lead against Ottawa with 10 minutes to go in the third period, blew it, but won in a shootout, and then had a 1-0 lead in the first period, get soul crushed by Sorokin's save on Gustafsson, don't respond in the second period, fall behind 3-1, get that goal early in the third, and then Clutterbuck comes down and beats Samsonov top corner, and they were done. And it's like, there are now, last night they played almost a complete 60-minute performance against Florida. They bounced back good, but in the playoffs, the teams that are the most consistent, game 1 through game 7, are the teams that win. And Toronto has yet to prove to me that they can be consistent on a 7-game span.
Well, and it's interesting, Samsonov, his wife is pregnant. I guess she's due to give birth to their first child any day now. Before the game, Keefe was asked specifically, what if she goes into labor during the game? What happens? And he kind of laughed off the question. But after the game, we were around Samsonov, and, he was asked about a couple of the goals. He said, well, I got more important things to worry about right now. And look, he's not wrong. Birth of his first child is important.
Yes.
But you lose a game 7-2. You're in a playoff race. You're trying to kind of strengthen your grip on second in the division. You're trying to clinch a berth. You can focus on that also a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would argue is, birth of the first child's nice, but sometimes the birth of the second child, like in my family, it's much better situation.
Same for mine, Russ. Yeah. they made a lot of mistakes on the first one.
Yeah, everybody goes crazy over the first one, and then the second one, it's a better ride.
The second one was absolute perfection. No, but I'll just say this. It's like, okay, maybe that response from Samsonov was a means of deflection of a bad performance. It was a bad performance, and the thing is, Matt Murray, the last two games, Russ's favorite goaltender, Matt Murray, he stoned. I mean, he stoned Florida yesterday, and he was great facing 52 shots against Ottawa. I continue to believe that Samsonov, who was like 18-2-2 at home, but under 500 on the road, may start a series against Tampa. But I think Murray will play in that series. They're not going to stick with one goalie for 7 games. I'm convinced of that. So
I will say this about. Go ahead, Dennis. You go first.
So they're going to do what Carolina did in 2002 and rotate goalies, where Carolina went with Urbe one game and Kevin Weeks the next.
And they did an 06 with Gerber and with Cam Ward.
Well, they didn't really do it in 06. Gerber just failed to the point where they had to put in Cam Ward.
Well, Ward started, then Gerber came in for a series, then Ward came back. It was back for.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, no, they went to when it's not injury. I mean, last year Francouz came in for Kemper, but Kemper was injured. Or the Philadelphia or Edmonton in 06. There have been teams that have used multiple goaltenders, but usually that's not by design. And I don't, like I said, I don't think the Leafs are winning.
I do want to point out to you, Mike, that ESPN has Matt Murray projected to play 28 games. He might play 29, but he is not going to play the 31 that it would take for you to win the bet against me. I said it at 30, Dennis,
right.
and Mike took the over, and he's going to lose that.
Well, I think you're wrong because
that's a low bar. That's a low bar, Dennis, for a starting goalie in NFL.
So he's at 23 right now, right, Russ?
24.
He's at 24. Okay, he's going to play 2 of the 3 games this weekend. Or he played on Thursday. He's going to play on Saturday against Carolina. So that'll be 25. I think he's going to get. I think he's going to be right on 30. It's going to end up being a push. So anyway,
he'll have something that will occur between one of these starts, and he will get pushed from that start. That's the Matt Murray way.
Russ is just praying for that.
It's just the truth.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's look at the West before we end the show here. Dennis, I look at the Central Division, and it's 4 points separating Dallas, Minnesota, and Colorado. But the looming factor here is Colorado has got 2 games in hand on the Stars and on Minnesota, and it's not out of the realm of possibility Colorado shoots by them and ends up in first place in the Central.
Absolutely, that's a loaded lineup.
Yeah.
The one question I had, and I had this question last year going to the playoffs. I wasn't sold on Darcy Kemper, and having seen a lot of him when he was here, I'm not sold on Alex Georgiev.
What makes you not sold on him?
I'm going to say the .895 save percentage at one point last year.
Yeah, but that's last year. That's also when he doesn't know when he's going to be in next. You remember Georgiev, if somebody was injured, he knew he was playing the next 5 games. They were going to be great games.
Yeah, again,
he's just different as a backup, I think.
Maybe, but I'm just not necessarily sold on him. Maybe I need to see more Avalanche games, but I can see a case where if it's a series where he has to go up against a Jake Ottinger.
Yeah.
Jake Ottinger can steal a series. I don't think Georgiev can steal a series.
He's got a 9-9. I've watched him. He's good this year.
Colorado is not as good as they were last year, but they're still
really better in net.
No, but let me finish my point. I'm saying in front of the goaltending, they're not as good as they were last year, and they won with Pavel Francouz and Darcy Kemper, who was dealing with an eye injury. Now, do I think that Georgiev is as good as Kemper or Francouz? Probably, but the margin for error is less because the team in front of him is not as good. I mean,
yeah, but Georgiev is better than Kemper. I covered that cup. Kemper gave away a game with a horrible goal that he gave up, and I was backing Kemper up to that point. And then I was like, this doesn't look good. They still ended up winning, but I would take Georgiev over Kemper every day of the week. Like, it wouldn't even be close.
Now in the Pacific, Dennis, I mean, right now we're talking about 10 games left in the season, and Vegas is 4 points up on a number of teams for top spot in the West, and that's with Jonathan Quick, who looked like he was spent in LA, and now he's riding the wave of emotion to prove everybody wrong. And we don't know if Logan Thompson is coming back. We haven't heard a peep out of that. So it seems that Quick is going to be the guy. But then you look at like how things set up in the West, and their first round matchup could be against Winnipeg, and Winnipeg could beat them. I mean, it's not out of the Hellebuck could beat them.
Absolutely, Hellebuck could. It's not another round possibility. Hellebuck steals the series, and and for sure he's a great player. But I don't think there's nearly enough talk about Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers. Those guys can put up some numbers in a series, and it wouldn't be shocking if Winnipeg knocked out Vegas in the first round.
Yeah, I do want to let Mike know Thompson played last night. He had 37 saves. He beat.
Okay.
So
okay, I didn't know, but
yeah. So he, as I said they would, Vegas extinguished the Flames. I said that yesterday that they would, and yesterday I'm carrying over that bad pun to today.
Yeah, I was gonna say bad pun. Now, right now, if the season ended today, it would be a repeat of the first round matchup from last year, LA Edmonton, which I'm sure it just overjoys the Kings having to face Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. But nobody expected, Dennis. Nobody expected LA to get them to 7 games and last year, and they did. And
that tells you that Mike is going to pick the Kings over him because of his hatred.
Oh, just out of spite, of course.
Right.
No,
I'm
I'm
going to spite. He will do it, even though he knows they're not going to win.
I'm going to pick the Kings because if they play Jack Campbell, he's gonna let in about 12 goals. But my point is here is like if there's a team, nobody can shut down McDavid and Draisaitl. No, it's not possible. But a team like the Kings with Danault and Kopitar up the middle, they can limit them enough that they can make it a series, and potentially, if they get great goaltending out of Korpisalo, they could beat the Oilers.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising. Jack Campbell is Jack Campbell. And I saw him earlier this year against both the Rangers and the Islanders. He was not great in either game. I think if I'm remembering correctly, they lost to the Islanders. They beat the Rangers, but yeah, they won in spite of Jack Campbell, not because of Jack Campbell.
Yeah, and I would think
Stano's right, Mike. So Thompson did save 37, and then came out late in the game with a groin pull.
There you go.
I still think he'll still be the guy, though. I do. He's obviously getting closer, and he had a good game. So as long as it wasn't disastrous, I didn't see anything online where it's disastrous.
But the point that my favorite name of anybody in the chat is El Guapo.
Yeah, that's what you're going to go with as your source, El Guapo. Right.
No, he's just stating a fact. Doughty was out for the playoffs, so he was not part of their defense, and they didn't have Fiala in the lineup, and they still forced Edmonton to 7 games. So I think the Kings have a better chance of beating them this year than they did last year. And we know in a 7-game series and in a playoff series, they're going to get physical on McDavid if they can.
Yes, you just take the Kings, Mike. I agree with you. You're right. Take the Kings.
If it's Russ, I'm going to save
if it's Edmonton against anybody, you're taking anybody.
I'm taking Edmonton against Satan. I'm taking Satan against Edmonton.
Wow.
Okay.
I mean, Satan's got a pretty good record. I'll admit that.
Yeah, yes, he does. He's a devil. He's a devilish kind of guy. All right, we'll end there.
Yeah, please.
We'll end on a high note. For Dennis Gorman, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.